Welcome to the Reconnection Club podcast, the show that helps parents heal troubled relationships with their adult sons and daughters. I'm your host, psychotherapist Tina Gilbertson. Each week, I'll offer you compassion, clarity, and personal development tips designed to help you reconnect, not only with your child, but with yourself. Now let's get started. Sometimes the adult child who's estranged from parents, and possibly but not always other family members, is the black sheep of the family. That is, they're different in some noticeable way or ways from other family members. Maybe their politics or religion is different. They may have hobbies or a career that the rest of the family doesn't really understand. They may be eccentric, or they may appear to be underachieving compared to their siblings. To find out how being a black sheep might contribute to estrangement from family, I interviewed Dr. Elizabeth Dorrance Hall. She's a researcher who's explored and written about the experience of people who identify as the family black sheep. I'd like to play an excerpt from that interview with you today in the interest of sharing some insights that may help you unlock the puzzle of estrangement from your adult child. And just a note about terminology regarding the black sheep. Dr. Dorrance Hall refers to these folks as marginalized family members, indicating that they feel themselves to be on the margins rather than fully integrated into the family. I asked Dr. Dorrance Hall if she thought it might be helpful for the parents to have a conversation with the black sheep child and just kind of talk about the differences so that it's a conversation and not just an underlying silent dynamic that nobody talks about. We'll start by hearing how she answered that question, and she'll also talk about other things that parents need to be aware of if they want to help their black sheep feel more of a sense of belonging. So again, the question I asked was whether to talk openly about that child being the black sheep.
I think it really depends on the relationship. So each family would need to kind of feel out whether or not that would be helpful. But as a communication professor, certainly my advice is usually open communication is important and useful in most cases. Certainly there are times when we shouldn't talk about everything, especially, I've had marginalized family members tell me that the way they manage this difference and this disapproval is they just don't talk about certain topics with their family members, and that can be a really helpful and useful resilience strategy. So we talk about that as creating and negotiating boundaries, so drawing lines around what we're going to talk about, what we're going to share, but having conversations about those boundaries can also be helpful and why you're setting them up. But other times it maybe doesn't need to be discussed. So you could just know, like, whenever I bring up this topic, it really seems to steer the conversation in a bad way, and everyone leaves feeling worse. Well, that's not a key conversation you need to be having. Don't talk about, usually it's like politics or religion or one of those kind of tense kind of topics that people can really disagree on that are fundamental. It could be helpful, certainly. I think especially checking in and trying to find out how the person feels, especially if you have the sense that they feel a little bit disapproved of or excluded, but you're not intending that, checking in with them and, maybe not saying like, hey, do you think you're the black sheep, but doing it in a more sensitive way and letting them know that if you sense that they think that you disapprove of what they're doing, letting them know that that's not true. I think a lot of people can feel this sense of disapproval about some of their choices or what's going on in their lives without even telling their parents yet. So I've had marginalized family members tell me that they started feeling this disapproval and difference and exclusion before they even told their parents whatever was going on with them, like that they were moving or marrying someone that the parents wouldn't approve of. So their parents didn't even know yet, but they projected how their parents were going to react, and they had already started feeling disapproved of and excluded. So in that case, I would think especially communication could be especially helpful because they didn't even actually know how their parents were going to react. So yeah, all these things can be going on kind of under the surface. So in those cases, I would say communicating about what's going on could be really helpful.
Yeah, I was struck by what you said about how the child could feel disapproved of, even if there is really no disapproval there. It may simply be that there's a difference, or that the parent maybe hasn't expressed a lot of interest in that aspect of the child's life, that might be construed as disapproval. Well, you don't ask me about it, you must not like it,
right?
Kind of thing. So do you think that showing interest in something different that your child is doing might be kind of a gentle way of potentially making sure that you're not coming across as disapproving when you're really not?
Yeah. The other thing I would recommend is a lot of what I hear from marginalized family members is about expectations. So expectations seem to be huge, whether or not those are spoken or just seen through the parents' actions and beliefs. It seems like children are very much attuned to what their parents expect of them and whether or not they're meeting those expectations. So whether or not you've ever explicitly said, you need to become a doctor, if you've talked your whole life about how great doctors are and how that would be a great career and how I should have become a doctor, your children may kind of come up with that expectation of yours without you ever saying, you need to become a doctor. And so they may be feeling that disapproval, indifference, and marginalization without you ever saying, you should have been a doctor and now you're not, so I disapprove of you, right? You don't have to say those words for them to feel that way. So expectations were a big one. Another one people talk about in terms of expectations are all the rest of my siblings are married and have children and I don't. And so whether or not the parents ever said, I wish you would be like the rest of your siblings, just because the rest of the siblings took that normative path, at least currently in our society, they feel that way. They feel different from them. And so I do think in those cases it might be useful to say, hey, live your life however you want. Like, I love you no matter what, because they may be feeling this sense of, like, I don't live up to what you think I should be or what my siblings are, even if that's not how the parent wants that person to feel.
What struck me about this conversation with Dr. Dorrance Hall is how easy it could be, especially if you are not a black sheep yourself, to underestimate the impacts on the black sheep of some fairly common behaviors in families. When it comes to relationships, what we don't know can hurt us. So trying to really understand each other's experience usually helps a lot when it comes to repairing and strengthening bonds. And that's as true for families as for any other kind of relationships. One other thing Dr. Dorrance Hall said during this interview that I didn't share with you here is that people don't make the decision to estrange themselves from family just once and for all. They revisit that decision every day, every week. She said it's an ongoing process. To me, that is a very hopeful view. It means that even though your child may not want contact today, they might be open to thoughtful, loving contact from you tomorrow. If you're a Reconnection Club member, you can find the complete interview with Dr. Dorrance Hall about the family black sheep in our library at reconnectionclub.com. I recommend that you listen to the whole thing because it's full of useful information for parents and families. Until next time, remember that you are a loving, lovable, and still growing human being. So please take good care of yourself. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Reconnection Club podcast, I invite you to check out reconnectionclub.com. The Reconnection Club is for parents at any stage of estrangement from their adult, child, or children. So whether you've just realized there's trouble between you, you've been living with estrangement for years, or you're newly reconciled but still walking on eggshells, the Reconnection Club is your essential resource for information, support, and continued personal growth. With our courses and workshops, expert interviews, monthly Q&A calls, and a friendly, active community, the Reconnection Club is a wonderful place to be for anyone suffering the pain of estrangement from an adult, child, or children. So check it out at reconnectionclub.com.